Most people hear the word muscle and immediately think protein. That's understandable. After all, protein is what your muscles are made of, right? But here's the truth that many miss. Protein is just the starting line, not the finish. You can eat all the grams of protein you want, but if your brain and body aren't aligned, if the right systems aren't firing, muscle growth won't happen the way you expect, and more importantly, it won't last. When we talk about building muscle, what we're really talking about is a complex interaction between the nervous system, the muscular system, and the endocrine system. Protein plays a role in that it provides the raw material, but raw material without activation is like bricks without a builder. You need the signal, the blueprint, the drive, and that signal doesn't start in your biceps or your quads, it starts in your brain. Think about this: when you decide to lift a weight, that decision begins in your prefrontal cortex, a thought, a choice, a commitment. Then, a cascade of electrical signals travels down your spinal cord, reaching the motor neurons that innervate your muscles. Your brain literally wakes up those fibers. It tells them it's time to work. And it's only once that neural signal hits the muscle that any growth can begin. Now the quality of that signal is everything. If your nervous system is tired, undernourished, or underrecovered, that signal weakens. If your mind is distracted, unfocused, or chronically stressed, it interferes with muscular recruitment. That's why two people can eat the same amount of protein, lift the same weights, and get completely different results. One of them is integrating the brain and body, the other is not. Even hormones, things like testosterone, growth hormone, and insulin, like growth factor, don't respond just to food. They respond to effort. They respond to stressors and recovery cycles, to quality sleep and well-timed movement. And when those things are in sync, the body begins to build, not just muscle mass, but strength, endurance, neural efficiency. You don't just look stronger, you are stronger, you become it. So, let me say this clearly: if you're treating muscle growth as just a nutritional equation, grams of protein in, grams of muscle out, you're missing the mark. The science doesn't support that simplification. What the research shows us is that true hypertrophy, real muscular development, is deeply tied to the brain, neural engagement, coordination, timing, precision. And yes, effort. You need to create tension with intention. You need to move with awareness, not just go through the motions. Because when the brain is actively engaged, it doesn't just send a signal to lift. It reinforces the neural pathways that make the next rep easier, more efficient, more powerful. That's the neuroscience of adaptation. That's how muscle learns, that's how it grows, and don't ignore recovery. If you think of protein as fuel, you also need to think about when you're refueling and whether your brain is in the right state to even use that fuel. If you eat a steak after a workout, but then go right back into a high-stress environment, with your sympathetic nervous system firing nonstop, your body's not going to prioritize muscle repair. It's going to prioritize survival. Cortisol shuts down the anabolic processes. Your nervous system needs to shift gears, to rest, to digest, to recover. So yes, eat your protein, but know this: muscle growth is not just about nutrition. It's about signaling, it's about intention, it's about engaging the mind so fully that the body has to respond. The nervous system doesn't lie. It knows whether you're truly pushing yourself or just pretending. And when you push the right way, with focus, with recovery, with purpose, that's when the real gains happen. Because at the end of the day, protein is fuel, but the brain is the engine. When we talk about muscle growth, we often focus on the weight we lift or the food we eat. But what's often overlooked, and what the science keeps proving again and again, is that none of this matters without one critical component: the nervous system. Every rep, every contraction, every ounce of strength begins with the brain. Without a strong, intentional neural signal, your muscles can't respond effectively, no matter how much protein you've consumed or how many hours you spend in the gym. Let's break this down. When you decide to move, say you're about to perform a squat, that decision doesn't begin in your legs. It begins in your brain. Specifically, the motor cortex fires off a command. That command travels down your spinal cord, through the peripheral nervous system, and finally reaches your muscles via motor neurons. This process happens in milliseconds, but it's what separates a good lift from a weak one. It's not the muscle acting on its own. It's the brain triggering the muscle with precision, force, and timing. And that's just the start. When you're training with full focus and intensity, the brain doesn't just send a signal, it strengthens the pathways that make that signal more efficient. This is called neuromuscular adaptation. Over time, with consistent practice and intention, the signal from the brain to the muscle becomes faster, cleaner, more powerful. That's why experienced lifters can lift heavier with better form. It's not just physical strength, it's neural efficiency. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The nervous system isn't just telling the muscle to move, it's also monitoring feedback, how much load is being lifted, how much strain is being placed on the joints, whether the movement is smooth or unbalanced. Your brain is in constant dialogue with your body, and when that connection is strong, the results are profound. You begin to move with more control, recruit more muscle fibers, and prevent injury. The mind-muscle connection isn't just a bodybuilding cliche, it's a measurable, trainable neural process. But if that connection is weak, if you're distracted, fatigued, or not truly engaged in the movement, your body will default to poor mechanics. You'll compensate with joints, overuse certain muscle groups, and underactivate others. That not only limit its growth, it increases the risk of strain, burnout, and long-term setbacks. And there's another layer to this. When we train with intention and full neurological engagement, we trigger the release of certain neurochemicals like dopamine, adrenaline, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. BDNF in particular plays a crucial role in neuroplasticity. It helps your brain grow new connections, adapt to new stressors, and reinforce motor learning. This means your workouts aren't just strengthening your muscles. They're literally reprogramming your nervous system to be more resilient, more responsive, more adaptive. This is why the quality of your mental engagement during training matters as much as the physical load. Going through the motions without presence is like trying to grow a plant in the dark. You might have the soil and water, but without sunlight, without that neural spark, nothing meaningful happens. But when your attention is locked in, when your breath is controlled, when your intention is sharp, that's when the real growth begins. So next time you train, don't just count the reps. Make the reps count. Feel the movement, control the tempo, visualize the contraction. You're not just building muscle, you're strengthening the connection between your mind and body. And that connection, that's where the power lives. That's what unlocks your true potential. There's something deeply misunderstood when it comes to recovery. People think muscle growth happens during training. It doesn't. The real growth, the rebuilding, the repairing, the reshaping, happens when you're not in the gym, and more specifically, it happens when you're asleep. Deep sleep isn't just rest. It's biology's most powerful tool for transformation. Your brain and body use that time to rebuild tissue, reinforce new neural patterns, and release the hormones responsible for actual growth. If you're not prioritizing high-quality sleep, you're leaving a massive amount of progress on the table. Now let's zoom in on what happens during deep sleep. During the slow wave phases, what's called non-REM deep sleep, your body releases a large pulse of growth hormone. That hormone is critical. It stimulates muscle repair, helps regenerate tissues, and supports fat metabolism. You could have the perfect training program and ideal nutrition, but if you're missing this recovery window, the raw materials just won't get put to work the way they should. And it's not just about hormones. There's a neural reset that happens when you sleep. The brain doesn't shut down, it reorganizes. It strengthens the neural circuits you used most intensely during the day. That means the movements you practiced, the tension you created under load, the coordination between muscle groups, it all gets consolidated at night. Your brain is literally reinforcing the exact pathways that made your workout effective, embedding those patterns deeper so next time you come back stronger, more efficient, and with better control. This is also where consistency in sleep, wake timing matters. Your circadian rhythm, the internal clock that tells your body when to produce hormones, when to wind down, and when to activate, relies on regularity. When you stay up late scrolling, when you eat too close to bedtime, when your sleep is shallow or interrupted, the rhythm gets thrown off. And when that happens, your nervous system doesn't fully shift into parasympathetic mode, which is where all the repair work happens. You stay stuck in a low-grade stress state, and your body doesn't fully engage in the anabolic, growth-oriented processes it's designed for. The science on this is incredibly clear. Athletes who prioritize sleep, who protect it with the same focus they bring to training, recover faster, gain more lean mass, and perform better under pressure. And the opposite is true as well. Chronic sleep deprivation leads to hormonal disruption, slower recovery, greater risk of injury, and increased fat storage. It's not just about feeling tired, it's about your system literally failing to regenerate. So the next time you think about optimizing for muscle growth, ask yourself not just what you're doing in the gym or what you're eating afterward. Ask yourself how you're sleeping. Is your room dark and cold enough? Are you giving your brain time to wind down before bed? Are you respecting the fact that what happens while you're asleep may be even more important than what happens while you're awake? Because if your sleep is shallow, your growth will be too. One of the things most people overlook in training is timing, not just how long your workouts are or how many days a week you train, but when you train, and I'm not talking about convenience or gym hours, I'm talking about biology. Your body runs on an internal clock known as the circadian rhythm, and it plays a huge role in how well you perform, recover, and grow. If you're training at a time that's out of sync with your natural rhythm, you're not just fighting gravity in the gym, you're fighting your own physiology. Your brain controls this rhythm through a tiny structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It helps regulate everything from hormone production to core body temperature to alertness. These rhythms peak and fall across a 24-hour cycle, and they have a direct impact on your strength, coordination, and mental clarity. For most people, the sweet spot for peak physical performance falls somewhere between late morning and early afternoon. That's when your body temperature is elevated, your reaction times are faster, your grip strength is stronger, and your pain tolerance is higher. In other words, your brain and body are aligned for output. If you train during that window, you're not just working harder, you're working smarter. Your central nervous system is more alert, your muscles are more responsive, and your focus is sharper. That translates to better lifts, cleaner form, and deeper engagement. But if you're constantly training at times when your system is sluggish, first thing in the morning with little sleep, or late at night when cortisol should be dropping, you're fighting an uphill battle. The nervous system isn't primed, hormone levels aren't optimized, and recovery is compromised before you even begin. Timing also impacts hormone flow. Testosterone, for example, tends to peak in the morning, and cortisol, which plays a role in mobilizing energy, starts high and drops throughout the day. If you're aligning your training with these natural hormonal shifts, you get a performance edge. But if you ignore it, or worse, train at wildly inconsistent times, your body struggles to adapt. The nervous system thrives on rhythm and regularity. It wants to anticipate the stress you're going to place on it. That's how it prepares, that's how it grows, and it's not about being rigid, it's about being aware. If you know you perform best in the early afternoon, aim to hit that window consistently. If morning is your only option, then structure your sleep, nutrition, and warm-up routines to support that. Create consistency around your training block so your nervous system can adapt and your performance can steadily improve. Over time, this consistency tells your body, this is when we show up, this is when we go to work. That signal alone creates predictability, which reinforces stronger neurological engagement and more stable recovery patterns. This doesn't mean you can't get stronger training at other times. You absolutely can. But there's a reason elite performers pay attention to this. They know the difference between grinding out a session and actually training in alignment with the body's natural rhythm, and that difference shows up not just in the gym, but in how they feel, recover, and progress. Because it's not just what you do, it's when you do it that determines how well your system responds. A lot of people push themselves hard in the gym, thinking more volume equals more growth. But what they don't realize is that if stress isn't managed correctly, all that effort can actually start working against them. See, your body doesn't separate physical stress from emotional or mental stress. It all gets processed through the same system. And when that system is overloaded, the result is elevated cortisol. Chronically elevated cortisol doesn't just slow down muscle growth. It actively breaks muscle tissue down. You might be training with discipline, but if your nervous system is constantly stuck in a high-stress, sympathetic state, you're sabotaging your own recovery. Cortisol isn't the enemy, it's essential in the right doses. It helps mobilize energy, increase focus, and fuel performance. But the problem is, we live in a world where cortisol gets triggered all day long, from poor sleep to constant notifications to high pressure work environments. The nervous system rarely gets a break. And when you add intense training on top of that without building in proper recovery, you're not giving your body a chance to repair. The nervous system stays tense, muscle tissue stays inflamed, recovery stalls, gains disappear. This is why managing your stress response is just as important as managing your macros or your training volume. And the good news is, we have tools to shift the nervous system out of that sympathetic fight or flight mode into a parasympathetic rest and recover state. It starts with simple things like breath work. Deep, controlled nasal breathing activates the vagus nerve and helps signal the brain that it's safe to relax. Cold exposure, done strategically, can reset cortisol rhythms and increase dopamine levels in a way that supports recovery instead of suppressing it. Even just taking 5 to 10 minutes post-workout to sit in stillness and breathe can shift your nervous system into the right gear for repair. And beyond the techniques, it's the mindset around stress that matters most. If you're always pushing, always grinding, always adding more to your plate without time to decompress, you're not giving your brain and body what they actually need to adapt. Growth isn't just about stimulus, it's about response. If you can't manage the stress, you can't manage the recovery, and without recovery, there is no growth, only exhaustion. So it's not about doing less, it's about doing smarter. Because muscle grows when the nervous system feels safe enough to build. We talk a lot about macronutrients when it comes to muscle growth. Protein, carbs, fats, and sure, they're important. But what's often overlooked are the micronutrients. These are the compounds that don't get the spotlight, but play an absolutely critical role in making sure your nervous system and muscles actually communicate effectively. Because the truth is, without the right micronutrients supporting your brain, your performance and your growth will never hit their full potential. Take magnesium, for example. It's involved in over 300 biochemical reactions in the body, including muscle contractions and nerve function. If you're low on magnesium, and a lot of people are, you're going to experience more fatigue, more cramping, and slower recovery. Then there's omega-3 fatty acids. These aren't just good for heart health. They directly impact the flexibility of your cell membranes and the efficiency of neurotransmission. In other words, they help your brain send clearer, faster signals to your muscles. Choline is another big one. It's the precursor to acetylcholine, which is the main neurotransmitter your brain uses to fire muscle contractions. Without enough choline, the signal that tells your muscle to contract gets weaker, especially during high-intensity or high-volume work. Creatine isn't just a muscle builder either. It supports cognitive function by recycling ATP in the brain, just like it does in your muscles. And B vitamins. They're critical for energy metabolism and help convert the food you eat into fuel your brain and muscles can actually use. So yes, your protein shake matters, but what's going on neurologically matters more. If your brain is undernourished, if your neurotransmitters are depleted, if your neural signaling is sluggish, you'll never tap into the full strength and coordination your body is capable of. You won't recover as fast, you won't lift as clean, you won't feel as focused, and over time that compounds. Supporting the nervous system with these micronutrients isn't about taking a cabinet full of supplements. It's about being mindful of how your entire system operates. Are you feeding your brain or just your muscles? Are you thinking about long-term resilience or just short-term fuel? Because when your brain is firing on all cylinders, your muscles follow. Movement becomes more efficient. Mind-muscle connection gets sharper, recovery speeds up, the whole system gets better. When your nervous system is nourished, your training transforms from something mechanical to something truly powerful. So when we step back and look at the full picture, protein, yes, it matters, but it's just one piece of a far more intricate system. Muscle growth isn't just about what you feed your body, it's about how you train your brain, how you manage your stress, how you sleep, how you recover, and how well your nervous system is supported every step of the way. True growth happens when all of these systems are aligned, when effort meets intelligence and intensity meets intention. That's how you build strength that lasts. That's how you train not just for size, but for performance, resilience, and longevity.